Chapter 16. So much was going on in her head that it was hard to calm down. She was excited over the potential sale of the antiques, panicked with worry that something would happen before she could cash in on them, and feeling guilty as hell because these pieces had been in her family for a century. How did that make her feel? They all had enough money that they could hang on to these pieces and enjoy them. The devil inside whispered to her, "You don't like the furniture anyway, so what the hell? Just get rid of it." But it was definitely a toss-up as to what she should ultimately do. Shaking her head, she also pondered the cold case she'd been working on. But she couldn't get any more information to confirm or deny her hypothesis. She knew the townspeople would have gone looking for anybody missing in the floods. That was an obvious thing to have done. But where could the little boy and the handyman have gone? Apparently there had been no signs of them ever since. And that was strange too. Henry Huberts had family in Kelowna. He also had family in the nearby towns of Vernon and Penticton. So you'd think somebody there would have heard from him. But if he'd done something absolutely horrible, then he probably would have walked away from everything he had known and never returned. She couldn't imagine doing something like that. Then she stopped and drew herself up short. "Okay, so I've done something like that," she said, "but I didn't walk away from Nan, just my old life with my ex. Not that I had much choice. Besides, Nan was my cornerstone in this crazy new world." Then she had to consider the intruder last night. Was he coming back? She was tempted to grab a blanket and sleep on the couch. At least then he would wake her up. Up here she might miss him. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that was a good choice. She grabbed her comforter and called the animals. "You guys might as well come downstairs with me," she said. "You'll be my alarm system." She made a bed on the couch. It seemed odd to be sleeping on something worth so much money. But she figured that more than one person had slept on it over the years. She laid a sheet down to preserve it, which also felt stupid. But it didn't matter. She would do what she had to do. She stretched out, shutting off the light, leaving her upstairs light on. She pulled the comforter over her and felt measurably better. Nobody would sneak in here now without her knowing it. But they might try. She frowned and thought about that. Then she left her warm covers and grabbed the poker from the fireplace. With that at her side, she curled up in a ball, Goliath laying on her hip, Muggs at her feet, and Thaddeus resting on the back of the couch. And she snoozed away. A low warning growl from Muggs at her side woke her up. As she shifted, Goliath dug his claws into her hip, and it was all she could do to hold back her yelp. She looked up to see Thaddeus's eyes gleaming in the darkness as he stared toward the kitchen. The kitchen was out of sight, but the doorway that led to it was where something had grabbed all their attention. She listened, hearing the doorknob rattle. If it was the same person who had come last night, she figured he should know a chair was there. So it wouldn't work to get back in again. She carefully moved Goliath and snuck out of the covers with Muggs at her side, placed a hand on the back of his neck, and whispered, "Shish." Goliath rose and stretched, arching his back high into this weird witch's cat look. And Thaddeus, not to be left out, jumped onto her shoulder, digging in his claws in his panic to not be left alone. She crept forward and with the lights out, she could see a shadow outside at her kitchen door. The poker was firmly in her hand as she got closer to find out who the hell was here. She should have checked out the front to see if a vehicle was parked anywhere. Not that an intruder would be stupid enough to pull up into her driveway. But if he had, then Muggs would have definitely heard that. But the intruder had full access to her backyard now. Something she hadn't considered when she had pulled down the dilapidated rear fence. Not that she'd been considering assholes breaking and entering her property, either. She'd been all about cleaning up the rat's nest of 3 different mixed fencings and opening up her view to the creek. But it also meant it was easier for people to creep into her yard. She frowned, seeing the same shadow, wondering how she could open the door suddenly and smack him one. The doorknob turned again. This time, somebody had a tool scraping on the other side. He's trying to pick the lock. She frowned deeper and crept along the kitchen to see if she could see from the kitchen window by the table, but he was behind the framework of the door, so she couldn't see him. She knew he couldn't come in this door because of the chair propped underneath. She crept back to the front door, taking a quick look for any suspicious or unknown vehicles. At the bottom of the cul-de-sac was an old flatbed pickup. She stared, wanting to go outside to take a picture of the license plate, but was afraid to. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Mac. Intruder at back door. Trying to pick lock. Then she turned off the volume on her phone, leaving it in her hand so she could feel the vibrating buzz instead. She crept back into the kitchen to see who wanted in. He appeared to have given up on the lock and stomped his feet on the veranda. She was surprised he let his frustration get the better of him because, if she'd been upstairs, she would have heard that. Then she heard him swear. With an ear cocked against the door, she still didn't recognize the voice. A buzz in her hand alerted her. She backed out of the kitchen, hoping the intruder hadn't heard her. What she wanted to do, if he disappeared to the front door, was to go and see who it was. There was one simple line from Mac. On my way. But she knew he'd be at least 10 minutes. Could the animals attack the intruder enough to detain him? And if so, should it be at the front door or at the back door? If she unlocked the front door and he came in. That was the last thing she wanted, having her intruder inside to see those antiques. Nan had had her door open for anyone and everyone all those years she had lived in this house, and these antique pieces were still sitting here. But the minute word got out that the pieces were worth big money, Doreen knew everybody would view things differently. And they had, as witnessed by her 2 intruders to date. Or one guy coming back a second time. She vacillated between her choices when her intruder gave the doorknob one last hard shake, then he stomped down the veranda steps. He was a large man, wearing a black hoodie, with a baseball cap under the hoodie. She watched as he disappeared, at a run toward the front yard. She raced to the front door, not worried about being quiet. He tried the front door. She watched as the knob turned in his hand. The simple little closure defeating him. He brought out his tools again. She held up her phone in camera mode, ready to take a picture, but the curtains on the big front windows were closed. It was too dark for a flash because it would bounce back, reflecting off the window. That wouldn't work for her either. No way in heck would Mac get here fast enough. As soon as he did arrive, this guy would run. The best thing she could do was sneak out the back and come around to the front and see if she could trip up her intruder. With that thought in mind, she went to remove the chair at the kitchen door, propped it open for the animals, and then slipped around to the side of the house. She could see headlights turning down toward the cul-de-sac as she came around to the front. But her intruder still worked on entering the front door. He saw the lights coming and crouched below the railing. The light came up, going over his head and coming down and around the corner. Sure enough, it was Mac. She wanted to cheer. When her intruder realized the vehicle was coming toward him, the guy bolted down the front porch steps and tried to run away. But he came first into contact with Goliath, who snuck between his legs, tripping him. As he fell flat to the ground, Muggs barked in his ear. With the fireplace poker in hand, she stomped her foot on his back and held the poker tip against the center of his neck. "Don't move," she said in a deep, dark voice. He squawked and lay still. As he squawked, so did Thaddeus, crying out, "Body in the garden! Body in the garden! Body in the garden! Body in the garden!" He wouldn't shut up. Mac ran over. "Thaddeus, are you okay?" The bird stopped speaking and preened. "Thaddeus is fine. Thaddeus is fine." Mac had a flashlight and shone it at the man underneath her foot, but caught sight of the poker and followed her arm up to Doreen's face. Are you really out here confronting your intruder? He asked. She glared at him. You know how I feel about the contents of that house. He raised both hands in utter frustration. This guy could have killed you. And I could have killed him. She poked the point of the poker into the guy's neck for emphasis. Yeah, the guy called out. What the hell is going on? You were trying to break into this person's house. Mac squatted in front of him. Get that dog off me. Muggs was on the guy's back, his mouth full of the guy's shirt. Nah. I'm not doing that. I'm not exactly sure what technique he's using, but he's usually a pretty good watchdog. It's my house, the guy blustered. I forgot my key. At that, Doreen poked him harder in the neck. That's my house, she snapped. How dare you? Oh no you don't. That was Nan's house, and she lost it to me in a poker game. Oh yeah. And when was that? Mac asked in a drawn voice. 2 nights ago, he snapped. Well that's nice, Doreen said. It wasn't her house to bet in a poker game. It's in my name. Legally. Like 2 weeks ago. And I don't believe you. She would never have put up the house in a poker game. She said I could have anything I wanted. That's nice, but it's not hers to give away, Mac said. The man glared at him. She said it was hers. Well, it's not, Doreen said. It's mine. The guy tried to roll over and look up at her. I'm Doreen, Nan's granddaughter, Doreen said, and you're nothing but a dirty rotten liar. Dirty rotten liar. Dirty rotten liar, Thaddeus squawked, his wings wide as he flashed his brand new words at everyone loud and clear. Mac leaned back on his haunches and chuckled. I thought you were teaching that bird to say nice things. I forgot, she said. Who knew he'd pick up that phrase? Dirty little liar. Dirty little liar. The man groaned. I'm not lying. Yes you are, Doreen said. Because you were trying to pick the locks to get in. Of course I was, he said. How else am I supposed to get into my new home? In the middle of the night? Mac asked. I don't think so. He reached around Doreen, grabbed the guy's arms and hooked him up with handcuffs. He turned to Muggs, who didn't appear to want to let go of his quarry. Sorry, big guy, but I have to take this perp down to the station and arrest him for breaking and entering. And attempted assault and attempted theft. I didn't steal anything, he roared. And you're the ones who assaulted me. You're trying to break into my house, Doreen said. I'm allowed to defend my home. I didn't steal anything, he snapped. How do I know that, she asked. You were in my house last night. Weren't you? I'm still trying to figure out just what you might have stolen. And then you came back this time, so you were obviously back for more. You don't know anything, he spat out. I was just looking around the place. I wasn't hurting anything. No, you were casing my place. She glared at him. Looking for what you could steal. Admit it. Hey, I wasn't hurting anything, he blustered, but Mac had heard enough. He hauled him to his feet, dumping Muggs unceremoniously to the ground. But Muggs wasn't to be deterred. He grabbed a hold of the guy's pant leg and tugged it. With Mac pulling in one direction and Muggs in the other direction, the guy was being torn in two. Doreen figured it was better to walk Muggs toward Mac's car, so at least the basset hound was going the right way and was a help, not a hindrance. At his car, Mac put the guy in the back seat and turned to look at Doreen. Are you all right? She sighed, staring at her intruder. I am. But I'm not real fond of him. The intruder glared at her from the back of the vehicle. She looked over at Mac. Do you know who he is? Not yet, Mac said, but I will find out. Go on. Get some sleep. The excitement is over for tonight. He hopped in the vehicle and drove away.